my name is Lindsey Dicken, NCMG, and today we're going to be working on Zoe. Zoe is a dog that's very special to me because she's helped me with a lot of my accomplishments throughout my competition career. I've been on Groom Team for about 5 years, and Zoe has been with me the entire time. Won several first places with Bichons. I've won Groom twice back-to-back with this dog. Made the traveling team in 2009, got a gold medal in Germany with Zoe. And then in 2011, we went to Belgium and we won a silver medal. So those are just some of my highlights, but pretty much every huge accomplishment I've had has been with this dog involved, so she's really special to me. So today I'm going to show you how I groom the Bichon, which is a breed near and dear to my heart. I breed and show Bichons, so they're one of my favorite breeds to groom. They're really fun, and they're just really, really cool dogs once you get to know them. So first off, I'm going to start by talking about coat preparation because that's a very important part of this breed. I don't usually use a conditioner when I'm washing the dogs. I just do a nice good shampoo. But when I'm drying, you want to make sure to really stretch every inch of this hair out straight because your prep work will really affect the finish work of the dog. So as you can see, her coat's been completely straightened of the curl, so it stands out nice and full. And you want to make sure you get a comb completely through the whole dog. If you have a curly dog or a dog that's not combed out very well, it's not going to look very nice when you're done. So the biggest, most important thing with this breed or any breed is your prep work. So we've already done her bath and her prep work. I'm going to start by trimming her hind feet. I'm going to pick the foot up and comb all the hair down over her foot. And I'm going to start by trimming all the hair that comes over her paw pad, flush with her paw. And if you want to, you can kind of use your hand to squish the hair down a little bit. I like to have the heel nice and tight on the back foot. And I'm pushing this hair down with my thumb and cutting this hair flush with her heel. I'm not cutting up, I'm cutting level. You might have to comb a couple times to make sure you don't have any stray hairs. And then I'll go ahead and set the foot down and comb all the hair down and out around the whole foot. And what we're going to do is find her toenail, which her toenails are about right here. And we're going to cut straight up to the toenail on the front of the foot. And I'm just having my shears straight up and down, not leaned out or in. Just making a nice blunt cut right across where the toenail is. And from there, just round around the foot. Now, as I'm going around the base of the foot, I will start to lean my shear out at an angle to make a little bevel shape. So it's just slightly tighter towards the bottom. And that makes for a really nice clean look. You don't want to have a lot of hair kind of just smushed against the bottom of the table. Same thing for the inside as we did for the outside. Just comb it down and just neaten up the bottom. From there, once we have our foot set, I'll go ahead and set the rear. I always like to set my feet first, especially on breeds that have scissored coat, because I don't want to go ahead and scissor this whole leg nice and pretty and then smush it by picking it up to do the foot. So by setting the bottoms, I can work from the top and meet the bottom. I'm going to go ahead and pull all this coat up and start by setting her rear angulation. Now a Bichon should be, according to the breed standard, a quarter longer than he is tall. So that means from his prosternum to her hind end here, she should be a quarter longer than she is from her withers to the ground. Now, just because the breed standard says that, doesn't mean that's the way people like to groom for the show ring. They like to make them as short as they physically can with these dogs. So we're not going to leave a lot of hair back here or a lot of hair up front to accentuate the longness. We want to make her a nice tight little cobby package. And so that means we're not going to be leaving a whole lot of hair on her backside. So I usually start by pushing her tail up. I never trim any of her hind end with her tail down because it completely changes the shape. And you'll notice when I did my prep work, when I'm clipping her rectum, I also clipped about maybe an inch above the rectum, just the base of the tail, clean the hair off on the base of the tail. And that serves a couple purposes. It helps me set my line when I'm trimming the rear. And what I do is I push this tail forward, and I'm going to take my shears, and I'm going to lean this blade in against the base of the tail, but I've had my shear completely level. It's not tipped out or in, and it's almost horizontal. Just slide that blade in. I'm going to make a cut, and I'm going to cut completely out this way. And by sliding this blade in here, it's going to give you a nice, clean tail base. And just come completely out for now. From there, I usually like to use like a 7.5 inch rounded curved shear. It's personal preference, but I like these shears because it's the perfect size and shape for her little rump here. So I made this cut here, and now I'm going to follow the shape of her natural angulation. She's got a pretty nice rear, so we're just going to follow the curve. And it should be a curve. We don't want a nice point like you would maybe on a poodle. It's going to be a nice rounded shape following her natural angulation. The breed standard says that a Bichon should be rounded when viewed from any angle. And so keeping that in mind, we don't want any harsh points or anything that doesn't flow well to the roundness of the dog. So as you can see, I'm just rounding everything off. And as I get down past the pin bone here, I'm going to take it pretty tight to the back of her thigh. You can either scissor up and down. Sometimes I'll come in this way. It's just all what's comfortable for you, whatever gets the job done. And as I'm doing this, keep combing the hair up. And you're going to want to scissor down pretty tight to about the bend of the leg. And if you're unsure where that is, just pick up her leg and bend it, and you can see where the bend in her leg is. Where that bend is should be your shortest point. And it can be short. If you've got a dog that's a little straight in the rear, you can take this really tight. Even if you see a little bit of skin, it's okay. And I'm just scissoring straight across. When I'm doing Bichons, I kind of think about them as a square first, which is completely against everything that a Bichon is. But I'm going to scissor a flat tabletop, straight sides, and straight this way. And then I'll round off the corners. So right now I'm focusing on this plane here. And because I'm using curved shears, it's got a little bit of a curve, so it's going to help me wrap around a little bit. But I want to just make sure that I've got the back of this thigh here tight and trimmed in pretty straight. Especially when we get to right here, because this corner on this leg, a lot of people make the mistake of leaving too much hair here. And it looks great from one way, but if you're standing from the front of the dog, you can't see the angulation. So by using the curved shears, it kind of helps wrap that little area in just a little bit. Once I have my rear set in, you can go ahead and go down your hock. And the hocks is where you can have a little bit of your own personal flair. There's not a really right or wrong way to do them. There's just a couple guidelines you need to follow, but people like to do things a little bit differently when it comes to hocks, so I'll show you what I do. We've already trimmed in the bottom of our foot, and we've trimmed to the bend of the leg. So from here, we're just going to tip this hair out. Just take a little bit off from the bend of the leg, taper in the short part to the long part, and keep combing this hair up and blending the hair, because you don't want to have a short spot and then a really long piece all of a sudden. You want it to transition and flow really nicely. And with these dogs, the comb is your best friend. You always want to keep combing, and I like to comb up. Some people like to fluff, but I find combing up works really well for me because it pulls everything out. So now we have our shape taking place. You can see your nice little curved rear, which is even still a little pointy for my taste. And so this is where some people get scared because we're always taught to leave this hair here. But I'm going to go ahead and just round that right off. We don't need it. It's a little bit rounder. Okay. So back to our hock. when we get to the hock, it's really nice and it looks really fancy to have a nice big flare, but we have to keep in mind that you don't want the dog to look sickle hocked. You want to have a nice parallel hock, or I'm sorry, a perpendicular hock. And so we can have a nice flare, but we need to make sure that the back of the hock is up and down as much as possible. So we're just going to take a little bit off. Sometimes it's hard for dogs to grow hock hair because it breaks easily depending on their hair texture. So we usually just need to neaten up the hair back here. So from there, moving on, now we have this line set. I'm not going to do too much to the front of the leg. I'll go ahead and shape in the side while we're here. But when you shape the side of the leg, we want parallel lines. That's very, very important for a couple reasons. Movement is very important. You want to have parallel lines so the dog has very clean movement. If you have big bell bottoms, it's going to look sloppy. When the dog is moving, it's going to look like the legs are hitting each other, and it's very distracting. And Bichon should have really clear, straightforward movement. So you want to do your best to not leave a lot of hair down there to make the dog look like it's moving badly. And so what we're going to do is you can do this with straight shears or curved. It's your choice. But we're just going to imagine our parallel line and just scissor straight down. You can go like I am now, or you can go up and down. It doesn't really matter as long as the end result is the same. You'll notice I'm not scissoring the hip right now. I want to come down straight. A lot of people make the mistake of scissoring from here. And what happens is they pinch this hip in, and then you have kind of like almost a horseshoe shape. And for now, we want to leave them just a little bit on the hip, so I'm just scissoring straight down on the side of the leg for now. It's very easy to get carried away, and then you step back and you're like, oh no, what have I done? But for now, just making my parallel line on the outside of the leg. And if you have a dog that is cowhocked, or has something strange going on in the rear, you can correct that just by the way you're scissoring the hair. You don't have to follow the shape of the dog's leg. Now Zoe, she's not too bad, but say she was cowhocked, you just completely ignore it and scissor a straight line down from this thigh muscle all the way down to the floor in a straight line. If you have a dog that moves close in the rear where it hits itself, you can scissor pretty tight to the inside of the hock to help correct that visually. As groomers, it's our job to make sure that the dog is presented in the best way possible, so we can help it out when we need to by the way we trim the hair. So her legs coming together, we have parallel lines on the outside and inside for the most part. If you need to, when I do the inside of the leg, lift the opposite leg to get in here like this. It's a little bit easier for me to get that way anyhow. So once we have the back and the sides of the leg done, we're saving this for a little bit later when we do the tuck up. I go ahead and set our top line in. Now the top line in the standard says that it's a level top line except for an arch, a strong arch over the loin. So they should have a little bit of a rise of the loin, but we're going to groom it to look level. So the Bichon breed is kind of a little bit of a challenge because the standard says, one thing, but then you groom it a completely different way. So we're going to go ahead and groom it to look very straight. And so at this point, I'll pull her tail out level with her spine, and I'm just going to scissor a flat, straight line completely across. And length will depend on the dog. Zoe's kind of a little girl, and she's very compact and cobby. So she's going to be fairly tight on her back. And this will accomplish a couple things. It'll make her neck look longer, which is always a good thing. And it'll keep her from looking too stuffy. If you leave a lot of coat on a small dog, it'll usually make them look just kind of boring and plain and a little too heavy. So I'm just scissoring straight across, like we talked about earlier. And I'm only going to about mid-back. I'm not going to scissor all the way up here. And that's because we need to leave this crest here. And I'll show you how to tie that in a little bit. But for now, just about mid-back is where we're scissoring. And always make sure you're completely straight, you're not tipping down, which is common, and that your dog is standing squarely, because all that will affect your finished result. You keep standing back and looking, because the dog looks different when you're standing right on top of it than when you're standing a little ways away. And just keep combing, and if you need to, you can use a scissoring spray, such as Magic Touch, which just helps to cut static and to get your comb through a little bit easier. There's a lot of different kinds, but most of them do pretty much the same thing, so it kind of makes your scissoring a little bit easier. Okay. And now I'm going to drag this hip up and just tie this part that we scissored here into the top line. So I'm just going to smooth out any little bumps that might be present, just connecting the 2 points. And now you've noticed we'll have this little spot on top of the tail. We've shaved the back side and trimmed the sides tight, but now we have this little ridge of hair. And what this ridge does is, if you have a dog that's got a low tail set or a little bit of dip, you can use this hair to disguise it. So I'm just going to pull the tail out straight behind her, and I can use my finger to kind of push it just a little bit, and just scissor this line straight with your top line. And it shouldn't be a very long scissored spot, maybe an inch at the most, but that'll help with the tail set, so you don't have any visible dips when the tail is down. So I just keep checking, like I see a little bit of hair that I don't like right here. If you have a dog that doesn't have great angulation, you can do a couple different things. You can take the area where her tail meets her body right here, and we're just going to dig that out. You can use a clipper, kind of like this, and scoop in, but we're defining the spot between her rear angulation and her tail. And what that does, cleaning off the side of this tail, it draws your eye from the angulation to the back, and it really helps the dog that might not have such a stellar rear. So we're visually changing the dog. Okay. Now from this point, I usually go to the front of the dog, and the reason why is if it's a dog I don't know, that I haven't groomed 1,000 times, like Zoe, I want to make sure that I'm setting a short rear and a short front, and then setting my tuck up, because if I place this too far back before I trim the chest, I can completely throw the whole dog off. So I'm moving to the front, and again, I usually start with my foot just to get that out of the way. It's my least favorite part. The front foot's going to be a little bit different than the back foot. On the back foot, we pushed all the hair down with our thumb and cut it off at the heel. We don't want to do that with the front foot because we want it to be a column. You can see with the back foot, it's a little bit shorter at the back of the leg, or the back of the foot. But for the front foot, we don't want any break. So I'm just going to scissor, let's see here, flush with the pad by the toe. And then when I get to the hair at the heel, which she's not very cooperative with this foot, I'm going to pull this hair and leave it covering her pad back here. And then I'll trim if there's anything here, but I don't want to cut it up here. And you'll see why in a minute. But had I taken all that hair out, there would have been a break at the back here. And that's what we're trying to avoid. So we need to leave a little bit of hair at the heel to help with our column shape. Now we comb all the hair down and out and find her toe. If she has a bad front, if her toes are going like this, don't find her toenails. It's always going to be a cut straight across here. So if her toenails are pointing over here, for instance, I'm going to pretend they're right in front. Make a nice tight cut right at the front of the foot. And comb everything down and round it out from there. But again, we can correct conformational faults by the way we choose to scissor the hair. We don't want to show anything that shouldn't be there. You always want to make sure you've got your toenails nice and short, because if you have long toenails, that'll really change the look and shape of the foot and the leg. So short toenails is always the best. I'm just combing the hair down and out and just cutting off the hair that's touching the ground, creating just a slight bevel. We just don't want anything dragging. Same thing with the inside of the foot that we did on the outside. I'm just going to lift this leg and trim off any little hairs that are on the ground. Once I have my foot done, my base set here, I'll go on to her chest. Just want to make sure that's out of the way because we're going to move into the leg next. Now with the chest and the Bichon, in this breed we're very fortunate to have dogs that have usually pretty nice chests. If you feel the dog, her prosternum's right here. She's got just a moderate chest, which is all the breed standard calls for. You don't want a really prominent, huge chest. But I'm feeling her, and she's just got a nice, adequate chest. Doesn't drop off. It's not hollow between her legs. So what we're going to do is we're going to take her chest very short. And if you find the Adam's apple, just right here, it's going to be very short, all the way from the Adam's apple through the whole chest. But that's a good guideline to find as the Adam's apple. And I'm going to start my shortest point at the Adam's apple and go tight through the throat all the way down through the chest. And I'm just working on this plane right now. I'm not going to wrap around into her shoulder yet. It's too easy to pinch a dog in the front if you get carried away. But I find for some reason it's easier if I think about it in planes and then just round off the corners. Oops, sorry, Zoe. If you have a curved shear, sometimes that works great right here too. Nice and short. The hair right here at the shortest point is maybe 1/4 of an inch of that. And this is a very common place where people leave too much hair. But just removing just a little bit and leaving it pretty short will make a huge difference in the dog's finished profile. Once I have the chest short, I'm going to slightly follow the shape of the chest into the front of the foreleg. And if you feel a dog, you can feel the chest comes in just a little bit into the foreleg. So we're just going to follow the natural flow of the chest into the foreleg. We don't want a huge chest. We just want a little bit of definition. And that's another way sometimes people make the mistake of trying to define a chest, and they'll leave hair to build a chest instead of taking away the hair to show the natural chest. So I'm just trimming just a little bit into the front of the foreleg, following the natural curve of the chest. I keep dragging this hair up. And sometimes you have to keep stepping back and looking at it to make sure you are taking enough. Because you can always take more off. It's just hard to put back. So once we just have a slight chest defined, which we can even take maybe even just a little bit more. We have a slight chest now, and we're going to go from the point where we stop the chest and drop that straight to the toe. So we should have a perpendicular line between the chest and the floor. Just going to trace a line straight to her toe where we cut earlier. And right now I'm just focusing on getting my shape, and I'm not really concerned about scissor work at this point because we can come back and nitpick later. But if you sit there and you pick and you pick and you pick at one spot, trying to get it perfect, you can whittle that leg away to nothing before you know it. So when I'm first starting this dog, I'm just going to knock in the shape that I'm looking for and come back a second time around to really perfect it. So now I have my chest and my front leg set, and from there you can go ahead and start your shoulder and the rest of your front leg. Now on the shoulder, we're going to go ahead and comb all that hair up. And I usually start by having the dog face straight ahead. If the dog's head is turned either way, it's going to really change the shape of this leg and the shoulder. And she tends to kind of pop her elbow out. So I want to make sure she's standing nice and square on her front legs with her head pointing straight ahead. And I'm going to come in over the dog like this, which is comfortable for me. And I'm just going to try to make my parallel line, which is very, very important to always have parallel lines. If you've got bell bottoms or pencil legs, as I call them, where they're really tiny at the foot, it's very distracting. It throws the balance off the dog. And it affects the movement visually, too. We want to have nice, straight ahead movement when the dog moves. It should reach like this without a lot of hair, like popping at the elbows. Right now you can see with Zoe, she has a little bit of elbow hair when she comes back like this. So we're going to go ahead. You can do this with the dog standing, or you can do it while it's up in the air like this. Just knock that little bit of elbow hair off right there. So that way we know when she's moving, we're not going to see elbows flying. We're just going to see a nice straight line forward. When I scissor legs, I usually do not lift the foot and scissor like this until the very end. Because if you do that, you think you're scissoring a straight line, but when you set it down, sometimes crazy things happen. So I usually let the dog just stand on the leg and set my parallel lines in, and then for finish work, I'll pick up the leg to really smooth out the finish. To get the inside of the leg, I'll lift her opposite leg, and I'm doing the same thing I just did on the outside. I'm just scissoring in a parallel line. And when you're doing the inside of the front legs, there's a very fine line between leaving too much hair and taking too much off. You don't want to have a really big gap between the front legs like this. You want it to be not quite touching, but you would just want to see maybe a little sliver of daylight between the front legs, maybe the width of your finger, or just enough so you can see definition between the front legs. If you take too much off, it's going to make the dog look really wide and coarse, and that's something that we're trying to avoid. Just keep combing down if you see anything, if any hair pooling around the foot. Just common. I usually have to comb down this hair a few times in the course of grooming the legs to get it to where I want it. I'm just combing down, and anything that's kind of pooling or slouching over that line I already trimmed comes off. And so now it's starting to shape into a little bit of a column here. You can see she's kind of doing the elbow pop. Just going to neaten up these little hairs. But like I said, right now we're just going for shape. Finish work will come later. With the back of the leg, usually we're going to grow a little bit more hair on the back of the leg than we have on the front of the leg. And this is to visually shorten the dog. So if we were to take all this hair off, it would really make her back look very long. So we're kind of helping our eye to see a shorter back dog by leaving a little bit more hair on her elbow and the back of her leg. Okay, what we're going to do now is her tuck up in her rib cage. And you'll see that I haven't really done the front of the back leg or the back of the front leg yet. I like to do all this kind of in one sweep. And this is the important part. What you can do, if you want to find where to place your tuck up on an average dog, you find the rib cage. And you want to find the very last rib which hers is right here, and I usually take my hand or my finger and I make a little mark with my fingers so I can visually see where I'm going to set the shortest point of my tuck up. I just take my scissors, and this is going to go almost right up to her skin. It's going to be very tight because most Bichons are a little bit short on legs, so we're going to give them height and lift them off the floor by making the underline very tight. So hers is going to come up right to her skin. And then the rest of her underline is going to be very tight, and it's going to be very moderate to almost straight. You don't want to have a poodle tuck up. It should be very subtle, not extreme or exaggerated. Sometimes with her, I even take a clipper blade, like a 7F, and I just clip her entire chest and her belly, just to get it short and do it quick. But you can do the same thing with shears. And you want to make sure that her chest, this underline here, meets her elbow. It shouldn't hang below. It's a very common mistake to make, to leave too much hair on the underside of the Bichon. And on a short-legged dog, it just really doesn't help them any. I'm lifting her leg forward so I can get this hair up between her front legs. I'm not cutting anything in the armpit or the elbow. I'm just continuation of the underline between her front legs, making sure it's nice and short. And you can see just by taking that off, all of a sudden she got tall. And it's not the dog, because if you saw this dog wet, you would be shocked. She is not a very cute dog wet. She has kind of a short neck, she's got short little legs, she's got big, long, fat body. But with this hair, we're really changing what the eye sees and making her something very elegant. And so now we have our underline set, and you can see we have this little piece of hair sticking out in our tuck up. And it's very tempting just to go in and cut that off. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my comb and I'm going to drag it up through the leg, the stifle, and into this tuck up. I want to pull every little hair in there that's hiding and pull it out. And then I'm going to do what I call the windshield wiper. I put the base of my shear, probably where the screw is, and I'm going to set that right in that notch that I made for the tuck up. And I'm just going to go back and forth, almost like a little windshield wiper, and clean off the hair in an arc like this. I'm not digging in, I'm just smoothing it out. We don't want to see a waistline. When we look above the Bichon, we should see straight lines. So I'm not going to dig in and make a waist. And just by doing this little windshield wiper motion back and forth, it helps smooth the stifle up through the tuck up into the rib cage. And from there, I'll go ahead and neaten up the front of the leg. Now we want to see not a straight line from tuck up to toe, but a slightly rounded to give the hint and suggestion of a knee. So we're just going to take off the very tips. You don't have to take off a lot. And bring it right into the toe. And keep combing it up and out. This is where hair likes to hide. And just smooth this line. And I'm going to go ahead and trim a little bit down here too. As you're working, sometimes you'll see little hair sticking out in places you've already trimmed. Just going to keep dragging the hair up, checking my tuck up and underline, making sure there's no stray hairs. From there, we're going to go ahead and finish scissoring the rib cage. We've already scissored our top line. We've scissored our underline. Now we're just going to round out the rib cage. We got to be very careful not to make the dog slab-sided. So I talked about making a flat tabletop here, and now we're just going to round off the corners and round around the rib cage. And actually, usually at this point, I switch to a longer curve. This is an 8.5 curve. And I'm being very careful right here not to dig into this crest hair that we've left, because we're going to need that later. I'm going to drag up the back of the foreleg. And we can almost do like the little windshield wiper thing right here too. If you are having problems with elbow hair sticking out or having that separation, sometimes you'll see it where you can see like a separated elbow and it's not very pretty. You should just have the rib kind of flow into the shoulder and into the elbow. You don't really want to see a separation. So same idea as a tuck up. We're just kind of rotating the shear down like this and smoothing off anything that's coming over our line. And again, I always drag the hair up on this dog because it's going to want to fall. But by dragging it up, you're going to pull out any little bumps or imperfections or wads of hair that you might have missed.